Hello everybody, welcome to this edition of the Coaching Conversation. In this series, we're looking to help business owners, business leaders see how coaching can help them and their teams be the people they want to be, achieve the things they really want to achieve in their life. We also aim it at fellow coaches. What we're really looking to do is to show them our experiences and hope that inspires them and helps them develop their own skills and practices. I'm Whiley. I've been coaching business leaders and business owners around the world for the last 2 decades. Nothing more to say now other than get ready, get comfortable. Here comes this edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hello everybody, welcome to this edition of the Coaching Conversation. And today I'm joined by my very good friend Normandie Wragg, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Nugent Care in Merseyside in the northwest of England. Our subject today is that very sensitive issue of diversity and inclusion. And so before we go very much further, Normandie, could you let the audience know a bit more about the real Normandie, please?
The real Normandie.
Yeah, the real one. Yeah,
the real one. Absolutely. Well, my name is Normandie. I'm Canadian, and I've been living here and working here in the UK since 2021. I'm a charity leader and a social dancer as a hobbyist.
You've been here a lot longer, since 2021.
Oh, pardon me, 2001.
I've known you a lot longer than 2021.
I know. It was a test and you passed.
No, what, as in the role of Chief Executive of Nugent, first of all, tell us a bit more about Nugent and then tell me about what you do as the Chief Executive.
So Nugent is a charity based in Merseyside here in the UK, and we are a large charity that provides health and social care and education from beginning of life to the end of life. We have approximately 450 staff, and we have approximately a turnover of about 17 million. So we're a large and significant charity. And my role within the organization is to set the vision and the culture and adhere to our mission and values across the organization, and to keep trying to inspire people in all the work that they do. And it's absolutely amazing what our teams do every single day. Most recent years, since 2020, one of my large focuses has been equality, diversity, and inclusion. So right now, my keen focus is to make sure that that's embedded across everything that we do as an organization.
I was curious about this because obviously as a chief executive, it's essentially the boss of a very diverse in terms of service provision organisation, that you've got more than plenty of things to be worrying about. And I was curious as to where D&I sits in that rank of priorities, but you may have just given me a clue. But where would you put it? Absolutely
right at the top. You know, when I think about cash and finances of the organization, which I'm totally accountable for, we must, because we're a people business and because we help people, you know, as a charity, we help people and we rely on the people who work with us and alongside us to be able to do that most important work. Equality, diversity, and inclusion has to be really right up there, because we need staff, you know, to be engaged. We need them to feel included in the work that they do, inspired by the work that they do, so that the beneficiaries have the best possible experience that we can possibly give them. So without that being held right at the top, and I mean beyond me, so I am not the top of that pyramid, it is the trustees. So if we didn't have the support of the trustees to do that important work across the organization, there would be a key man risk on the CEO. So it's important that the trustees incorporate that into their strategic thinking alongside of sustainability for the future, safeguarding, development of our goals and our aspirations, and fulfillment of mission. It needs to be right up there because it is about people and their experiences.
You've been chief executive for a number of years now. Has this importance, or the identification of this as a subject, changed in that time for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Absolutely, it did. In 2020, when George Floyd was murdered over in the States, the world entered into a period of reflection and advocacy And at the same time, as I said earlier in my introduction, I am a dancer. So I dance a dance style called the Lindy Hop, which is was born in the States through the African American community. And I was attending a lot of seminars and monologue sessions about the experience of the artists and the culture, people who live within the culture who started this dance form, and a lot of discussions around appropriation versus appreciation. And during that time, I was attending on behalf of my dancing knowledge and company. And then I started to look back over my shoulder, and I was thinking, in the charity that I am responsible for, which is a large charity with lots of staff and lots of people having different types of experiences, are we doing enough with regards to EDI? And I think the honest answer was no, we're not. Because one, I didn't know the answer because I hadn't been diligent enough to be hearing the voices of the people below me in the way that would be meaningful in changing our strategic focus. And so I entered a period of I continued and went deeper into a period of reflection. So whilst most organizations were putting up, some really well-meant symbolic gestures on their social media and saying we stand by, I really needed to have a greater, deeper understanding of what EDI meant in the current context myself. So I continued going to seminars, I continued reading, and it took me, I think, about 6 months before, I put together our first anti-racism pledge and our commitment to the future, because for me, it needed to be real and meaningful, and I really needed to understand it. And it's not just about the icing on the cake that says, this is what we'll do because it's the right thing to do. It had to be for me to be able to lead this, something that I internally absolutely resonated with and came to accept that I don't know the answers, that we are nowhere near where we need to be on our finished journey. And to be able to feel comfortable with that and say, yeah, you know what, we have a lot of learning to do, we have a lot of reflection to do, but if we don't start now putting one foot in front of the other, we won't get there ever. We will just keep continuously perpetuating the structures that have been passed down through decades and decades. And those structures, as we come to know, could be reflected in colonialist thinking. It could be built on structures that may not be pertinent or relevant or resonating in today's world. So the way I describe it is that it is a journey. And I know I'm going to make mistakes. Our organization is going to make mistakes. We're going to be doing some great work as well. And when we have not got the thinking right, or we've not done the best that we could possibly do, or that the people and the lived experience from the people we work with or alongside speak up to us and say, or show us, or create a conversation that shows us a different way, then we need to be responsive and reflective on that. Because I think there's a risk at organizations becoming paralyzed with inactivity for the fear of doing something wrong at the expense of doing anything at all. So that's where we have. So the short answer is we have significantly changed in our outlook since 2020.
It's very interesting. As a coach, this subject comes up increasingly often in sessions with business leaders, coaching programs for business leaders. And the first point is your point, which is awareness, I think, is actually saying this is important, but I don't know what to do. Where do I go from here? Yeah. You can Google HR policies and stuff, and you can go on and create training programs, and that's valuable and important, and they need to be done, but they don't change the culture. They don't change the inner essence of how the people and the organization feels, and that's why it's such a difficult journey, isn't it? And it's why it's such a uncharted journey, I feel. And as a coach, I try to find, I won't say encouragement, that would be totally the wrong word, but I try to encourage people to think differently about what it all means and try to give them different perspectives. And I recently watched a training video, an education video around this subject, and they used a different vocabulary. They used a vocabulary about advantaged groups and disadvantaged groups. And they talked about unconscious bias. and things like everybody has unconscious bias, everybody is in a disadvantaged group, and everybody is in an advantage group, and multiples of those. And as individuals, if you can recognize bias, your own as well as other people's, if as an individual you can recognize where you sit in an advantage group and how that will make you behave and how that will affect others, and if you can recognize when you're in a disadvantaged group, how that will make you behave and how that would affect others, you start to get towards the core of what you're trying to change, because you're changing understandings and awareness. And if you think about unconscious bias, is that something that you've built into your programs? Is that part of what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So when we started making the anti-racism pledge, part of that pledge included inclusive leadership training and coaching and training around unconscious bias. And that started with the trustees of the organization. Because if I was going to ask the trustees to come along this journey, that I had been on and that I was encouraging the organization to go on, there needed to be some clarity and awareness raising for a group of individuals, collective and individually, as to what unconscious bias was and is. And it was really interesting because the person who we had to come into the organization was very astute in the way that unconscious bias was discussed. So in Liverpool, we have two football teams here in Liverpool. We have Liverpool Football Club and Everton Football Club. And it was being able to discuss the differences in the unconscious bias that supporters from one football club had towards the fans of another football club. And it was a really interesting way to talk about unconscious bias and taking it away from maybe some of the more sensitive topics of EDI in terms of race and other culturally sensitive topics. That talked about football, which everybody, or at least people, could relate to, even if they're not football fans. They could understand the dynamic because it was so intrinsic in everything. So people could, recognize if someone was wearing a blue shirt and what kind of unconscious bias and assumptions they made about that individual. So we definitely were bringing thoughts and talking about unconscious bias. And in particular, in terms of the organizational operation, we talked about, and we really spent a lot of time in the last 2 years focusing on affinity bias. So one of the organizations or pledges that we signed up to was a pledge called Show the Salary, which was focused on charitable sectors, which was, if you're going to advertise a role within the charitable sector, show the salary. Show how much you are willing to pay for the work that you're asking to be done in that role. And that gave people clarity and transparency about what that role entailed and what the remuneration would be. But the second piece of that I found really, really interesting was that traditionally we would have asked people what their salary was in their current or previous roles. And asking that information creates an unconscious bias because you're judging that person's worth, ability, and skills based on the salary they made previously. And that has some challenges to it. So, for example, when I first came to the UK from Canada, I had by the time I was looking for work within the job market, I had a master's degree, I have a counseling degree, I'd been to university, I've been working in high-level counseling roles. I was, trying to find work within the UK, and I needed to take a minimum wage role within the UK as my first role so that I had UK experience on my CV. Yeah, because most people say, well, what do you know about the UK? You person from another country. And so the next employer could have looked potentially at my CV, saw that I was making minimum wage, and made a judgment or an assumption on my level of skill. And I might not have made it through to an interview process because I might have been sifted out because of that. So the Show the Salary campaign allowed us to ensure that every role that we advertise, we show the salary. And we also have a statement about inclusivity and within the organization, diversity and inequity. But also we don't ask for the salary prior because it removes that bias. And we add that to the other pieces that we have within our group recruitment processes that try to remove that affinity bias. But I still think affinity bias is something that that people will struggle with, because we try to find people that look like ourselves. We engage with people that look like ourselves, or sound like ourselves, or act like ourselves, or behave like ourselves. So that's something that we're actively working on. So unconscious bias will be an ongoing reflection, I think, for many years to come. It does exist. And when I spoke about the pledge to the organization, one of the key topics that I came to sit with was my level of privilege within the organization. So my position affords me a level of power that maybe some other people do not have. In fact, it's clear not everybody has the power that comes with a CEO position within an organization, and it's up to me to be able to use my privilege and the power and the privileges and the other benefits that come with that, to be able to influence the change in our organization. So if I had been perhaps a frontline carer, would I have had the ability, as I do in my current role, to be able to implement an anti-racism pledge? Would have I had the ability to sign up to show the salary campaign? Well, I wouldn't have. So I choose to use the privilege that I have and the voice that I have to amplify the lived experience of other people as shared with me, or as I have learned about, because I'm trying to be responsible for my own learning rather than putting my learning on the shoulders of other people. So yeah, there's so much in unconscious bias and privilege, and being able to see the world through a particular lens. I know I've been talking a lot, so pardon me. One other point that I have this adage, I suppose, I don't know if that's the right word, when I think about unconscious bias, and that is, don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Yeah. So if you're judging the fish on its ability to climb a tree, you're not actually appreciating all the skills that a fish has, and in the environment that they are most going to thrive in and live in and be able to breathe in. You're expecting it to climb a tree, and that's setting your own standards for someone who's probably not going to thrive on a tree. And it's the one thing that keeps going through my mind all the time when I talk about unconscious bias.
It's interesting because there's lots of these different vocabularies that get used around this, and I think because of the sensitivities of the subject, or the potential sensitivities of the subject, people do fight very shy, and they use strange words. And you use a very simple word, privilege. You could have used another word, underprivileged. And I used advantaged and disadvantaged.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, am I in an advantaged, privileged position? And if so, how do I behave with that? Or am I in a disadvantaged or a underprivileged position? And how do I behave within that? Because in many ways, and on many different occasions, recognizing where you are or your organization is and how you or they are behaving gives you some clues as to what you can do next to make the change that you're looking to make. So, for example, I am, we all are, but I am a very advantaged person. I have had a great education and a great career, and I have a degree of financial success. I'm a very disadvantaged person because I'm not in my 20s. And all of that is going on all at the same time. And my reflection on that, the way that I deal with that personally, impacts other people. Do I get bitter and twisted about the fact that I can't get the young CEO's job? No, because I don't want one. But I could do. I could get very, very upset by the fact I don't get past submission of CV stage. And if I look at the other way, if I don't recognise that through my lens of advantage, my lens of privilege, I don't understand how people who don't have my opportunity suffer. And so I think part of the work of a coach, and certainly the way you're working through at Nugent, is to get this awareness into a vocabulary that people can respond to. and with confidence, and not be frightened by these sensitivities. And you said right at the beginning, or a little while ago, about being frightened of doing it wrong because you feel you could get into trouble. I think if you can distill it down to very simple basics, people know what they're doing and they know that it's right. They can find their own way. As a foreign national working here, have you personally directly experienced bias?
Yeah, I think so. I've got two examples that I would probably share to that. One was after the Brexit vote, and I think that was it was about inclusivity. So after the Brexit vote, I remember I went to a barbecue at a friend's house, and it was the day after. So the whole, like, everybody at the barbecue was talking about this, and and so I come in, and as soon as I start talking to anyone, clearly I'm not British. My Canadian accent gives me away every time. And so one of the things that was said to me at that time was, why don't you go home? Why are you here? And part of it would have been me being sensitive about the vote, but there was also this, at the time, this huge surge of foreign nationals not feeling welcomed within the country. And many of my friends and colleagues who were EU nationals, professional academics and professionals within the Merseyside City region, got up and went home. And there was just this huge swell of not feeling welcome. And that's only a small, from my perspective, as a middle-aged white woman who lives some areas of privilege in my life. That felt really shocking to me, that I wasn't welcome. And I can only imagine what some of my friends and colleagues who may have different life experiences have experienced throughout their own lives. And the second example is, again, about inclusivity, because inclusivity is about being accepted, welcomed, but also expected. Yeah. So if you are truly inclusive and thinking inclusively, you are expecting people with different life experiences than your own, who behave differently, maybe look differently, come from different areas of life than you do, expect them to be at the table. So when I was applying for the CEO role, part of the assessment center was to attend dinner with high members of our archdiocese, our bishops within the archdiocese, and members of the trustees who were watching the interaction. It was all about politics, and the short list and the people that were at the assessment center, there was 5 of us at the time, and myself as the only female within that group. And during the dinner, which was absolutely lovely, having some really great conversations about politics, one of the other candidates leaned over to me and he said, love, I thought you were the secretary. So the expectation that if I was in the room full of male candidates, that I was the secretary, is an example of not being expected in that environment. So it's a really interesting piece, because I know I've heard stories and I've listened to lived experiences of other female leaders with disabilities, female leaders who are from different cultural, ethnic backgrounds, that have far more horrendous stories about not being expected or included than that. That was my experience. And the unconscious bias that's included within that is just so prevalent. So there was a phrase about to describe diversity and inclusion, was that diversity is being invited and inclusion is being asked to dance. Not my quote, but I thought it just resonated so greatly with me. So I have had experiences, yes, and I've heard other stories of from other people who have had great stories, not great stories, but greater stories of impact. Which reminds me, this is the piece I was trying to come to. So Dr. Beverly Metcalfe from the United States coined the phrase intersectionality. And what she speaks about is where different elements of privilege and underprivilege or life experiences intersect with each other and create different nuances. So you might have an individual who is a newcomer to a country, who is also disabled and might be experiencing social economic hardship. And all those three intersecting roads of those experiences will create a different experience to someone who is, who might be experiencing 3 or 4 other intersecting experiences. So when we try to put it, there's a risk at individuals putting experiences in a hierarchy of what's more important or less important. And the intersectionality conversation actually realizes that it's different webs interconnecting with each other that create multiple variances of experiences. And the ability to sit back and just accept that one person's experiences, because of all those intersectioning ideas and again, experiences, is something to be listened to and reflected on, rather than, well, my experience is better than yours and my experience was worse than yours. They will be different experiences, and all of them important to be recognized and heard and expected and accepted.
It's interesting to see this. One of the nuances of increasing this kind of awareness amongst groups of people within an organization is you begin to bump into the not like me bit. And when you bump into the not like me bit, you get to the, and therefore I behave like this. So if they're not like me, they must be wrong. They must be different. I'm clearly right, and etc., etc., etc. And it's that changing of that particular behavior where that bumps into each other that is at the heart of making this work. And for me, I think it's understanding at a very base level where, as you just described, intersections occur for other people, and seeing them for the other people and making your behavior adapted to accommodate that as best you can. But it is a very complex series of I was going to say intuitions, but it's a complex level matrix of understandings and recognizing difference that goes on almost in real time everywhere, that makes this such a challenge. I wanted to just move the conversation on as part of the program of change that you've built in. You've talked about your learning. Where did you go for that learning? Did you get coaches in? Is it education? Was it reading? What did you do?
All of those and more. So it started off with attending, I guess what we would recognize them now as monologue sessions. So that was people who would identify themselves as the Black African-American community out of the United States, talking about dancing. There was a group that really put together some really effective learning sessions within the dance community. And then there was another group out of the UK and Europe that did something similar, and that's where it all started from, which led me into reading books on people's perspectives. So Why I Don't Talk to White People About Racism Anymore was one of the books that I had read early on. Then I started reading even more deeply about unconscious bias and leadership inclusiveness. Talking to people, then we started to roll it out within the organization, and we created monologue sessions within our own staff's experience of working within Nugent. So, for example, we had one individual that was talking, who was part of the LGBTQIA plus community, speaking about how this individual had to feel like he had to come out every single time that he spoke to a new person, and what that felt like as a staff member within the organization. And, it really changed the perspectives of people who had assumed in hindsight that they knew much about the experience, lived experience of individuals through EDI. And it was so profound in these monologues. And we had a series of monologues. I think we had 4 or 5 people speak, where they spoke to camera, and the rest of the leadership team turned off their camera so this person could just speak their own truth with no reflections from the audience. And it profoundly affected members of our leadership team. Some people were talking about it weeks later and reflecting on it. Some people had really emotional responses through tears in the moment, and just realizing how much unconscious bias that they had actually experienced themselves. And when they heard it from a different perspective from somebody who had that lived experience, how that changed, and they realized that their thinking, without them even being aware of it, was in a different place that wasn't helpful to their friends and colleagues. And that was the difference. This wasn't individuals that they didn't know. These were individuals that they worked alongside of, day in and day out for years, and were unaware of the different thinking that was going on. So I think it's really important as a leader to go on your own journey of understanding, so that you know what that feels like within yourself. Because when you start being a part of the group in your own organization, you are going to see the emotional reactions coming out, and that could be fear, that could be anger, that could be remorse. It could be a range of emotions that you're not expecting. But to be grounded, you need to have already processed, in my opinion, you need to have already started that journey yourself, so that you know where you stand as an individual, because you're going to have a lot of emotion come your way that's presented in different ways and playing out in different ways throughout the organization. And it's about courage, because sometimes it feels really uncomfortable, especially if you're coming from a position of privilege and realizing what that privilege or advantage could have afforded you, and what it maybe led to the detriment experience of others around you. And also the ability to realize you won't always get it right. You are going to make mistakes and you will be corrected. But hopefully, doing that with the greatest of integrity at the forefront of your head, and not letting your amygdala, your primitive brain, hijack that moment where it becomes a fear response, and rather it's what can I learn from this response? How can I be appreciative about this feedback? Because feedback is an absolute gift. And because it took that person, whoever's giving that feedback, a whole lot of emotional investment that you may not even be aware of, to be able to speak up to you. So being able to sit back and say, this isn't about me. I need to recognize that this person just had an enormous amount of courage and a whole lot of maybe negative experiences in their life that led them to a position where they felt this way, of courage to be able to speak up to someone, especially a person in a position of power, to give that feedback. And it is a gift. It is a real gift.
Yeah, this is an incredibly difficult, complex subject, as we've just explored. I'm going to bring the conversation to an end then, Normandie, and thank you very much for your time and sharing your experiences in this. I really appreciate it, and I know the audience will too. A final thing, as someone who came here from Canada, someone who's lived amongst us for 20 years, and you're about to go home this spring, what will be the abiding memories of living amongst us when you go back to Canada? And it can't be Liverpool and Everton Football Club, sure.
No, I don't think it will be. I think it will be the people I've met along the way. That is the greatest. I know I keep saying gift a lot, but it's truly, truly a gift. It is the people I've met along the way, the experiences that I have had, both good and bad. And I regret nothing, because every single one of those experiences has made me who I am today. And I am extremely grateful for the people who have held my hand, laughed with me, had a dance with me, drank with me, shared moments of angst and celebration with me. It is the people that I will always, always remember. And the most amazing thing about having that is that people know how to work Zoom, and they know how to work Teams and WhatsApp. So I think those people that I've connected with and resonated with over the last 20 plus years, I will remain in contact with, because the world is so easily accessible by some individuals. Again, acknowledging privilege, because I'm privileged to have internet connection and technology to be able to do that. So yes, it will be the people that I'll remember, and the people and the experiences that I'll take home with me.
And I'm crestfallen because I thought it was going to be your Yorkshire pudding recipe.
It probably isn't. I'm not a Greek.
Normandie, thank you very much. If any of our audience wanted to reach out to you or to reach out to you, Nugent, to just discuss this further or get more advice and help, how can they reach out to you? What would you say to them?
I think, well, because I'm going to be in Canada soon. So if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, you can find me, Normandie Wragg, at LinkedIn. And if you want to find out more about the charity that I'm working with, Nugent Care, is wearenugent.org. And we're doing some wonderful work. So we're always looking to partner with like-minded organizations and like-minded people who want to continue on our journey on EDI alongside us, charitable partners, charities of the year, even just to support and buy Christmas cards from us if you celebrate Christmas. So yeah, wearenugent.org or Normandie Wragg at LinkedIn.
Normandie, thank you very much. So there you have it, everybody. Thanks again, and I'll see you the next time. So there you have it. That was the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hope it was useful. Hope it did what it was meant to do for you. If you want any more information about our coaching practice, it's at the executivemindset.co.uk. While you're there, you can book your own free session, which will give you a much deeper insight to what coaching can really do for you. If you enjoyed the session, please give us a good rating. And if you want to reach out for further information, do email me at theexecutivemindset@sagegreen.com. That's about it for this time, and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.